Hello, I'm Ventura Police Chief Darren Schindler. Your Ventura County law enforcement leaders are aware of increases in race-based hate crimes and hate rhetoric occurring across our nation. Please join with us as we say no to hate, and instead reaffirm our commitment to respect all persons while celebrating our diverse communities.
The County of Ventura has declared racism to be a public health crisis. The Ventura County Law Enforcement Coordinating Committee agrees and wholeheartedly supports this position.
Your local law enforcement agencies continue to work hard every day to serve and support our communities. This includes protecting their rights and safety, regardless of nationality, but also of orientation, gender, identity, age, or beliefs.
We take all reports of criminal acts seriously, and we will thoroughly investigate all reports of hate crimes. We will not accept any form of hate or violence in Ventura County.
We pledge to stand together and strengthen our collective efforts to end hate. Hatred has no place in our communities.
We must value and respect diversity. This is the one thing that makes us a great nation. We categorically condemn hate and acknowledge the harmful impact it has on our communities.
We are committed to working with our communities, providing support and resources to anyone affected by hate violence.
We stand together. Please report any threats or acts of hate to your local police or sheriff's department.
Please join me and my fellow law enforcement leaders in condemning any and all acts of hate and racism. Working together, we can all do our part to make our communities safe for everyone.
Okay, you can go ahead and move to the next slide.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Chief David Livingstone of the Simi Valley Police Department, and here with me tonight is Commander Charles Shorts. We're here tonight to talk to you about a very important topic. We're going to talk to you about investigating hate crimes and what the department is doing in that regard, and also what you can do if you become a victim of a hate crime or a hate incident. So we have a brief presentation for you tonight, and we're going to also open it up to questions and answers. But before we get started, I just wanted to say a couple things. Number one, housekeeping-wise, this is available in Spanish as well. So if you want to activate the Spanish translation, you'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there is a globe with interpretation on it. If you just click on that, you can hear it in Spanish. So we want to make that available to all our Spanish-speaking residents as well. Second, before we get started, as many of you know, this last year we have come through a very trying time in terms of our country and some of the things that have come up and the legacies that have been brought to the surface. And so we're at a point in time where we have seen an increase in hate incidents and hate crimes across the country. Some of them more violent, but nonetheless, any of them that happen, whether in our community or anywhere in this country, are problematic and they need to be investigated. And we need to make sure that the public understands what we do as a we'll have an opportunity for you to send your questions to us, and one of our experts here in the department will be able to answer your questions, or I'll be able to answer your question. One of the things I'm very proud of here at the Simi Valley Police Department is that we have what we call hate crimes coordinators, and these are officers throughout our organization who are specialists in investigating hate crimes and documenting them and reporting them. They also teach at the police academy, and they teach our officers here in-house on how to recognize these different symbols and different objects that come up in different incidents, and make sure that those are processed and documented correctly to the right authorities. The other thing is we've developed strong community partnerships. You've just seen the video from the Ventura County Law Enforcement Coordinating Committee, which I'm a part of, all the chiefs and the sheriff and the district attorney, including the community college and the Cal State Channel Islands chiefs, we meet once a month and we talk about what affects our communities and how we can partner together and work on a common solution to these problems. And so I think we're lucky in Ventura County to have that unique working relationship. And in other areas, maybe because of their geographic size or because of different jurisdictional boundaries, they don't have that kind of collaboration, but we're lucky to have that here in the county so that when something does happen in one city, we can talk to our counterparts in other cities and we can come up with collective responses to those problems. Also working very closely with our district attorney is another big important part of that, and making sure that we're getting those crimes investigated properly and getting the victims the help that they need. The other thing is we have a few other unique partnerships here in the county that I want to talk about. With the NAACP and the Ventura County chapter, we have a strong working relationship, and also with the Anti-Defamation League in the Tri-County areas that's located in Santa Barbara. Through the Anti-Defamation League, we also have a direct link through them to the Centers of Extremism, which is a think tank. It's a nationwide think tank, and I've participated in their webinars where they talk about the trends that are happening across the country. And the reason we do that is so that we're aware of when we see things here in Simi Valley, they're often not isolated incidents. There's things that have happened before in other communities. And so by cross-reporting these incidents to the Anti-Defamation League, it opens us up to a whole other spectrum of analysts and databases that can help us, investigate and get to the bottom of these issues. The other thing that we have here that's unique in Simi Valley is we have an investigator that's an intelligence officer who's cross-sworn as an FBI agent. And that officer works hand in hand with all of our partner agencies and allows us to have access to databases so that when we have things maybe that don't fall into the classification of a hate crime or a hate incident, we can still follow through and do an investigation and try to find out the source of these before they become problems. Again, what we see happening across the country is shocking to us all. And it's something that as law enforcement officers, we take seriously and we want to investigate to their fullest potential. That being said, as you'll see through our presentation tonight, there are times where things are protected under the First Amendment. And so we have certain guidelines we have to follow. And oftentimes, when these incidents happen, they're very traumatic and they get a lot of attention and people want instant action. And, we more than anybody want that action as well. The problem is that if we go too fast or we make mistakes in the investigation or we don't document things correctly because we're acting out of haste and out of emotion, because these affect all of us, then what happens is we're not able to bring these cases to a successful conclusion. So again, these are things that I thought were important because of some of the things that have happened around the country and even some things that have happened here locally to get this presentation out and to make it a topic of our ongoing forum. So with that, we'll go ahead and open up into our presentation, and we're going to have Commander Charles Shorts talk as well about some of these issues. He has been teaching at the Police Academy for a number of years. He's an expert in hate crimes, and he is a great resource here in the department for our community. And he's been a very key individual in terms of helping train our officers and also our hate crimes coordinators in the academy. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started here.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. What I'm going to do is kind of take you in an overview of hate crimes investigations in our county and cover some different facets. Here are some of our objectives. First of all, we want to be able to explain the difference between a hate incident and a hate crime to our community. We also want to inform you what you should do if you're a victim of a hate crime or a hate incident. We're going to explain what the police procedures for investigating hate crimes and hate incidents are. We're going to briefly discuss the impact of hate crimes and hate incidents on the community. We're going to provide you some statistical information, some community resources, and at the end, we're going to open up our presentation for questions. First thing we want to cover is what's a hate incident. A hate incident is an action or behavior motivated by hate, but legally protected by the First Amendment right to freedom of expression. And some of the examples of hate incidents include name calling, insults, distributing hate material in public places, and displaying hate material on your own property. One of the points that we really want to underline is that the US Constitution allows hate speech as long as it does not interfere with the civil rights of others. If a hate incident starts to threaten a person or property, it becomes a hate crime. So even though we feel that these different incidents lay the groundwork for insensitive comments or things that are not appropriate, nevertheless, they don't necessarily meet the threshold of a crime.
Go ahead.
Now, and specifically as we talk about the California law as it pertains to hate crimes, Section 422.55A of the California Penal Code defines a hate crime. A hate crime means a criminal act committed in whole or in part because of one or more of the following actual or perceived characteristics of the victim: race or ethnicity, nationality, religion, gender, sexual orientation, physical or mental disability, or association with a person or group with one or more of these actual or perceived characteristics. Chief, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much with these, there are very specific things that we have to, or elements of the crime that have to be satisfied for us to get a successful prosecution for one of these things. So when an officer comes out to the scene and you believe you've been victimized in a situation like this, make sure that you try to get as much information, as much detail as possible, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's a situation where it's traumatic. The more information we can get, the identity of who is involved and the nature of what they said, that's going to help us a great deal to document that so that the district attorney can have that information to make a good decision on filing the case.
Okay. So here are the hate crimes criminal acts. They include unlawful acts such as vandalism, battery, assault, murder, attempted unlawful acts such as arson, attempted arson, threatened unlawful acts such as murder or assault. And whether the acts take place or attempted or threatened, they must be directed at causing physical injury, emotional suffering, intimidation, or damage of property.
And again, with these, we're covering a lot of data here, and these are the elements that we need to satisfy in order to bring successful prosecution. Now, that doesn't mean that that these going through these elements are something that we're kind of separating from and just being very factual on. We recognize that even if some of these incidents don't rise to the level of these elements, they're still traumatic, and we still need to document them. We still need to make sure that we have a record of these, because oftentimes, as you know, these aren't the first time that somebody has been involved in these kind of incidents. So, but if we don't know about it and we don't have a record of it, even if that particular incident may not meet the criteria specific enough to bring a criminal charge against somebody, it's still something we can document and be aware of, so that if something does happen in the future, that it's something that will help us build a better, stronger case.
So how are hate crimes charged? And this isn't a thorough list, but these are some of the elements and some of the things that we consider when we're out doing the street investigation. In order for someone to be charged with a misdemeanor, the Penal Code specifically says it's a misdemeanor by force or threat of force to willfully injure, intimidate, interfere with, oppress, or threaten any other person in the exercise of that person's constitutional rights based on that person's real or perceived, again, race and ethnicity, nationality, religion, gender, sexual orientation, physical or mental disability, or association with a person or group with one or more of these actual or perceived characteristics. Some of these, number 1, 2, 3, and 4, what we're talking about is that we're talking about protected classes of people, and they're protected by the provisions of this section. And so when we're out investigating, If any of these areas are why someone's being targeted as a victim, then the statute would cover it. So Penal Code Section 422.7 elevates the crime of interfering with an individual's civil rights to a felony when the suspect has been convicted of intimidating or interfering with, or if there is conspiracy to interfere with an individual's civil rights. Some of the elements that can contribute to that, if the suspect has the ability to commit a crime of violence, if the suspect causes an actual physical injury or causes property damage in excess of $400.
So basically, anytime you have a situation where somebody is using one of those protected classes that Commander Short is talking about in the furtherance of committing that violent crime, that allows us to add that enhancement and also to document that and report that to the Department of Justice. So again, even if something happens and you think, well, I don't know if this is really going to, classify, or, don't get into that. Just call us and let us come out and get to the bottom of it and investigate it. So anytime these words are passed back and forth in any kind of a context, we need to know about it. So I think that's the important part. And that just gives you a little bit of a background on some of the things that we need to meet to bring those successful charges against somebody.
Now, one of the other things to consider is when we go out and we conduct field investigations, if a suspect, as an example, commits an assault with a deadly weapon offense, not only is that person going to get charged for the assault with a deadly weapon, in addition, they're going to get charged with the hate crime. So it's added to the primary charges. So it's important for us that we report hate crimes to the police department. If you have been a victim of a hate crime, contact the Simi Valley Police Department as soon as possible. The police department has personnel on duty 24 hours a day and will respond to your location and investigate. If hate crimes are not reported, the hate crimes may continue. Sometimes what we frequently see is people say, they'll call us and tell us this incident happened 2 days ago, a week ago. We want to get there as soon as possible because we're going to get the best interviews. There's evidence that's there that can be perishable, and we want to have the best chance to recover as much information as possible to do a thorough investigation.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree that, the sooner the better, but even if it has been a couple, weeks or whatever, and you didn't do it, it's still call us and let us come out there and document it. It's very important that we have to know. We can only help when we know the information.
So what we have here is a graph of the reported cases since 2019. To your left, what you can see is anti-Black cases. We had 8, anti-multiracial 2, anti-Hispanic 2, anti-Islamic 2, anti-Jewish 3, anti-male homosexual 2, anti-Asian Pacific Islander 1, and anti-other ethnicity national origin 1, where we couldn't determine what the ethnicity was. I think this next slide kind of gives you a context of the frequency that we've been seeing in the last 3 years in terms of hate crimes versus hate incidents. In 2019, we had 1 hate crime reported in the city of Simi Valley and 2 incidents, and that's out of 4,549 total crime reports. And what we're talking about there is we're just talking about traffic reports, not including the reports we write for traffic collisions and other incidents. In 2020, we had 6 hate crimes, and we had 4 hate incidents that were documented. And that was out of a total of 3,926 crime reports for the city. And thus far in 2021, we've had 3 hate crime reports taken, and we had 6 hate incident reports taken. And at this point, we're at approximately 1,275 reports for the year.
The one thing about this is that even though the numbers are small, the impact of these crimes is great. So, putting that statistic out there shows, a couple things. Number one, that, we're no different than a lot of other communities that experience these issues. But the fact of the matter is that one of these single crimes, really has a greater impact on the community, even than some of the other crimes that we investigate that happen more frequently. So that's why, again, when you look at the numbers, having the low rate is great, but like I said, one of those crimes can have a devastating impact, not just to the victim, but to the victim's families and across the board as a community. And I think that's why it's important, that we continue to be as vigilant as we are with it.
So when we have officers respond out to take hate crimes, the patrol officers will respond to the scene. They're going to interview all the victims, witnesses, and suspects. They're going to photograph and collect evidence. They're going to arrest suspects if there is probable cause to arrest, and they're going to document the incident in its entirety in a crime report. The question always comes up, can you report a hate incident to the police department? And we want you to know the police department will write an incident report on any hate incident that occurs in the city. We want to be aware of any incidents going on. We want to be able to get in front of anything and maybe do some counseling and coaching and head it out. And we also want to lay out expectations to any potential offenders if they are considering committing any crimes.
And I can't reiterate that enough. I mean, we've just gone through some complicated definitions for you, but anything that's related to this in whatsoever, the basic stance of the police department is we will document it, even if it's something that we can't, follow through with a formal arrest or prosecution of somebody. We want to know about it and we want to document it because it gives us a better sense of what's going on in the community. And we recognize sometimes these things go unreported. So, that's why it's important for us, to get the message out that you got to call us and let us come out and do what we need to do to document that. Because again, we can only help and only be effective on what we know. And, oftentimes, again, like I said, these things go unreported and that's a problem. And people need to feel comfortable in coming into the department to make those reports.
We wanted to talk a little bit about the impact of hate crimes. Hate crimes have a devastating effect on victims, families, and the community. Incidents often occur in neighborhoods, places of worship, schools, the victim's workplace, or other locations where the victim has established personal ties. Direct victims have had a crime committed against them. Report that a crime has been committed against them. They suffer as a result of a crime. They have economic loss, sometimes physical injury, emotional trauma, or death. One of the big reasons why hate crimes are they're terrible and why they impact people so bad, it's because they're being targeted for things they can't change. You can't change your race, your ethnicity, your religion. And so it has a traumatic direct effect on the victims.
The other thing about these and in terms of direct and indirect victims, it also brings up the legacies of these hatreds that have been part of our own country's history. And when you have anti-Semitism, when you look at some of the things that have happened in terms of the global history, it brings up these age-old hatreds, and these are things that are real for so many people. And again, as a society and as a community, we try to move past those things. But when we take a step back and these things come out, it just brings up all those old legacies. And I think that's the issue, is that, making sure that we call it out and investigate it and bring people to justice that are committing these crimes, then we can start having a better path to move forward.
Now, when we talk about indirect victims have a close relationship to the direct victim. They often suffer emotional trauma and or economic loss as a result of being a witness to a crime. A lot of times they're members of the targeted group, and they make up the community where a crime has taken place. Hate crimes have a completely negative impact on the community. And so when they're occurring, it's a community problem, and we all have to get involved in making sure that we report it and we seek prosecution. We have a couple of resources here. The main one I want to point out is the Ventura County Family Justice Center. We're going to be posting this PowerPoint when we're done with the presentation. They're open Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, and victims can get assistance there. And then also the California Attorney General's Victim Services Unit. And there's a number and a email address that we're going to make available.
Okay, and with that, we can take some questions here. I've got one up here right now, and I'll repeat the question and then I'll answer it. Do you monitor the social media of law enforcement personnel for hate incidents? That's a great question, and I think it's an important one, because as we've seen with some of the high-profile events that have taken place over the last few months and over the last year, there have been law enforcement officers involved in these things, and so this is something that's very concerning for us in the department. And basically, we have a strong social media policy that doesn't tolerate that. We also, when we hire new officers, they are required to give us access to all their social media accounts. And as part of their background investigation, we look very closely at that, because oftentimes, you'll see that those things show up in people's social media, or they're liking sites that are connected to that. So these are really critical issues for us in law enforcement, because we're on the side that we're supposed to be investigating and calling these things out. And so when people start letting their political views and different things get into their duties, that becomes a problem for us. And so therefore, we take that very seriously and we don't tolerate it. So yes, we hold our officers to a high standard in terms of their social media, interactions. However, they do have First Amendment rights. So there are things that we can't, infringe upon, but things that are related to what would bring discredit onto the profession, or, extremist groups, yes, those will be dealt with, and our internal affairs will be on that very quickly. So let's see, we have another question here. I think we probably answered it in the presentation, but how many hate crime incidents were reported in Simi Valley last year? And again, we're going to make this presentation available so you can get the actual numbers.
I think that number for 2021 was 3.
Okay. So we're waiting for any other questions that you have out there. Again, like I said before on the previous slides that we've looked at, these crimes are such that they have a broad impact, not just on the individual or even in the indirect fashion that we talked about. They have a broad impact on communities, and in Simi Valley, that's one of the things that has, over time, when we've had incidents, they get magnified. And because, obviously we had the Rodney King trial here, and that's something that comes up quite frequently. But the nature of that is that you can't broad brush things. You have to look at things individually and deal with them as they come. And so one of the things that we've done here in the department is just try to be more responsive to those things in terms of having the hate crimes coordinators assigned throughout the different shifts, and also training our personnel. So again, they have broad impact and they hurt all of us. So when one person does something, it reflects on everybody. And so I think that's why it's so important for us to make sure that we stay out in front of these. So we got another question here. What is your procedure for de-escalating situations? And I think, the basic procedure on that is that we start with the most minimal contact with somebody. So in other words, if there is a situation where there's an argument between people and an officer responds, the first thing we're always going to do is we're going to go to our verbal training. So what we used to call in the business verbal judo, in other words, trying to communicate with people more effectively. So the way to do that is, try to de-escalate it by talking to people on a certain level and trying to bring it down. And then there's other things we can do to de-escalate. If there's a fight going on and there's friends and family there, we can try to work through them to try to de-escalate it. So there's a variety of things that we do. We always train our officers that you use the minimal amount of force necessary to accomplish something. And oftentimes, 98 or 99% of the time, just your presence at a scene and your firm directions to people are enough to de-escalate it right then and there. So that's pretty much what we do. We also do a lot of de-escalation training. One of the things that our officers also are trained is that when they go through defensive tactics training and they learn how to use these different control holds, they're also taught intervention training. So like if an officer is doing something they shouldn't be doing, they're trained to intervene. So that's part of de-escalation as well. So let's see, here's another question here. What are some of the challenges faced by officers and detectives while investigating hate crimes? Well, you know, each case brings something different. So some of the challenges are getting people, like any crime, to be willing to talk or to be willing to come forward and identify the perpetrator. So that's common to all crimes, but it's even more acute with hate crimes investigations. Sometimes they might know the person. Other times, you know, they might want to not say anything because they don't want to testify in court. So those are some of the challenges I think that we face with a lot of cases, but specifically with hate crimes investigations. The other challenges are, you know, meeting those elements. We've just gone through and shown you all the elements we have to meet, and walking that fine line in between what constitutes free speech protected by the First Amendment and what constitutes a crime. So that's a challenge for officers too sometimes, and oftentimes, you know, again, our partnerships with, you know, our fellow law enforcement agencies here in the county and the DA is helpful. Sometimes we might get something that you know, comes through and we take the report, and then we can contact the DA's office and work with an attorney there to say, look, you know, here's some things we need to do to enhance the investigation to get more detail. So those are some of the challenges that they face.
If I can add a couple of things to that, Chief. Number one of the other things that a victim can do is make sure that they get as much information as possible. If they have information, depending on what kind of event it is, the description, witnesses, time of day, who was around, what was going on, any information that they can provide us so that we have the best ability of doing a comprehensive investigation and obtaining all the facts, that's really important. If someone's involved in an ongoing hate incident that doesn't meet the threshold of a crime, it's really important that the party that's being harassed, if you would, documents everything. It doesn't need to be something that's over-engineered. It's as simple as taking out a notebook and on this date and time, this occurred. These were who were the witnesses. This is the information on the totality of the event, because that information may become material in some other factor if this winds up becoming a crime at some point.
There's another question here that's, I think it's a good question. Can you elaborate on what the specific hate crimes have been within our city? Well, there's been a few of them recently, and I think most people will recognize some of these that were reported in the press. But there was the incident of the graffiti that was on the wash by White Oak Elementary School of an African-American hanging. So there was that. That was probably the most recent high-profile one that we had. We successfully investigated that and were able to bring the individuals involved in that, hold them accountable. Unfortunately, they were all juveniles. And so, you know, there were different paths that we took in resolving that. In terms of you know, what we could do legally and what qualified under California law, and then getting them to some you know, training through the Museum of Tolerance. The other thing, the other one that we had recently that comes to mind, we've had a couple incidents at our different mosques in town, and where you know, racial epithets are used. We had another case where there was a battery involving a road rage incident where the suspect used a racial epithet towards the person in the other vehicle. So those are pretty much kind of what we've had recently. If you go back in time, we've had some that have been more severe, but recently they've just mainly been you know, name calling in the furtherance of committing another crime, and then of course the vandalism incident that was probably the most recent one that we had. I have another comment here, and I'll just acknowledge because I think it's good to acknowledge it. It says, "I'm glad you work with the Anti-Defamation League," and again, this is something that I'm very proud that we established that working relationship with them. It came in handy when we started noticing there were these anti-Semitic, horrific anti-Semitic posters posted on you know, light poles and things right around the Sycamore Cochran area. And we were able to kind of send that information from our reports to them, and then that links into the Center for Extremism. So again, we were able to identify the organization that's putting these out, and that was very helpful knowledge that we can share with our officers. So working with them, and I think collaborative approach to any of this is something that it's not isolated to one area. It's something that we have to work together with our partner agencies on. And then another question here is, could you envision one of your officers mistakenly using their gun instead of their taser when apprehending a suspect? Well, I don't know that that really has anything to do with the topic here, but everything is for me, an opportunity to give an answer to that. And, again, we all saw that, and that's something that is, to my mind and what I saw, and I only know what I saw, what everybody else did in the video, is something that is extraordinarily rare. It has happened before, and there are a lot of cognitive, psychological reasons why somebody might think they have, a gun or a taser versus a gun in their hand. You'd have to look at each individual incident. So I'd like to say, no, I could never imagine when that happens, but when these stressful situations happen, things happen quickly. And, oftentimes you've probably heard this yourself when you've witnessed an accident or a traumatic event, everything slows down and you lose kind of temporarily, awareness of your surroundings. That happens. The way you work through that is through training. And we, in fact, just yesterday, or actually just today, we are upgrading to a different taser. So we're doing all this training. And whenever these incidents happen in law enforcement, we as law enforcement professionals, we look at them, we debrief them with our officers, and we look at what happened and what went wrong and what we could have done to avoid that. So, really, those are tough situations. And I think, again, the way through those is training so that it becomes habitual, so that when you do get in a traumatic situation or stressful situation, that you're going to your training and you're not, having a cognitive disconnect and think you have one thing versus another. So again, that's what we do to try to address those issues. How is Simi Valley doing in comparison to the rest of the Ventura as far as incidents? I think we're about the same as the rest of the Ventura County. I know in talking to the executives at the other law enforcement agencies, we talked about this back and forth, and I think we're about at the same. I think Ventura County is about at the same level. One city might have one or two more one way or the other, but we're really about the same. And again, that's one of the benefits of working so closely with our partner agencies. In fact, the video that you saw at the beginning of this presentation was something that came out of our monthly meetings, where we recognized what was going on around the country with the anti-Asian crimes that have been happening. And we said, look, let's come out and collectively together put a message out to our communities so that they know we're aware of what's going on and we're here and that we condemn those kind of acts. So again, that's what I think the benefit of those collaborative approach to working through these are. We have another question here. Are you working with the schools on cultural sensitivity training? I don't believe we are working specifically on cultural sensitivity. I believe that is something that is going to be up to the school district and their curriculum. We do have a close partnership with the Simi Valley Unified School District, and we work collaboratively with them, and we're here to support them, and they support us as well. So, I think in terms of what they do, I think maybe the point of your question is, reaching children at a younger age to try to call this stuff out, so that we're not, creating generation after generation that are, growing up with biases and not being culturally aware. But I believe I would rely on the school to do that, and that law enforcement, doesn't have that educational role in that capacity through the school district. But we partner with them, and we're there to help them in any way that we can. So I don't see any more questions coming up. Again, I think these forums are a great opportunity for us to really talk about some of these issues. And oftentimes, one of the things that happens when there is a crime of this nature, people want instant action. And I think it's important to address that, because as we saw with the graffiti case in the Wash, there was a lot of rhetoric going back and forth that the department didn't take it seriously, that, we weren't following through on it. And oftentimes, I don't know how else to explain it, but these things don't happen quickly. We didn't have suspects in that case right off the bat, but it was the community that came forward that brought photographs that had actually witnessed the incident that helped us solve the case. So we really have to have that partnership with the community. We have specific procedures we have to follow in terms of documenting and investigating. So, like I said, jumping the gun and reacting out of emotion, because all these things are vile to us as well. And when we see them, of course, I wish it was as easy just to say, hey, this happened and we're going to, just come and swoop down and everything's going to be okay. But we have to follow the steps. And so, a lot of times it's not quick enough. And I understand that because, again, like I said, when these crimes are committed, it brings up these legacies that we all have, should have knowledge of, the legacies of the things that have happened in our own country and around the world. And so these are abhorrent acts and they demand, swift response. However, we oftentimes can't just, solve those problems very simply. And the wheels of justice, sometimes they move slowly, but in order to move correctly, we have to tick off those boxes to make sure we're doing everything right. So again, in that case, there were citizens that came forward and said, look, we have pictures, and almost like crowdsourced, and we were able to show those pictures to our school resource officer, who was able to identify a couple of those individuals, and then we were able to get that whole case wrapped up just by that. But again, it took some time to do that. And so that's why they're difficult, because they bring up those legacies and those hatreds, and we want to call those out right away. So I got another question here. The proactive measures the Simi Valley Police Department has taken to inform the community with these information sessions are fantastic. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for that comment. Again, this is really, obviously we're in the world of Zoom still right now. And one thing I should probably mention is, we're sitting here, both Commander Shorts and I have been vaccinated. And so we are following the CDC guidelines. We are, isolated here, but we've both been vaccinated, so we don't have to be wearing masks. And we do that because it's better for us to be able to communicate this way. But in this world of Zoom that we've all lived in over the last year, it really depersonalizes things. So it's something that's really, I know we're passionate about still having that interaction with the community. And I'm hoping that as we continue to, maybe see the light at the end of the tunnel with the pandemic, that we're able to maybe do these live in person at some point in the future. And that way, we're getting more of that interaction. We're having more of a conversation and not dealing with the digital world as much. But I don't want to wait till we get to that point, because there's been too much that have happened in law enforcement and in our nation over the last year, that I think that having this dialogue is really a step in the right direction. Again, I thank you for the feedback on that. We're going to continue to do this, even beyond when we get through to a better stage. And I got another question here. Can you name hate groups active in Simi Valley? Well, I don't know if you have any specific.
I do it, but one of my concerns would be is, first of all, we don't have any active, in terms of at least gangs that have that as their one of their guiding principles. But we also don't want to promote those organizations. So I have some apprehension on that.
I mean, pretty much we monitor all the different groups that are out there, across the country. And again, like I said, having that officer cross sworn as an FBI agent is really, it's so helpful, because it gives us the ability to bring in, federal officers if we need to. So if we had some huge incident here in Simi, we would have, a connection already in with the FBI, and basically be able to bring their resources to bear on it. So I think also, without getting into great detail, when we have a citizen call us up and say, hey, this is what's going on, I've noticed this, and then this person is saying these things and threatening and intimidating, we have access to the FBI's investigative capability to help with those. So if they are linked in with any of these organized groups, we'll be able to track that. And that's really something that's very helpful. That program started a number of years ago in our department in response to 9/11 and some of the things that we were monitoring at that time. But now, obviously, what's happened across the country nationwide is that we have more domestic terrorism than we do foreign terrorism. And so these are still resources that we can use to help better prepare us to respond to those things. Obviously, we want to be proactive, and we like to prevent crimes. That's what we do. That's why we exist in this business. But sometimes you can't stop everything, and so we want to be able to be prepared to be as reactive as possible, so that we can bring all those resources to bear in any type of a situation that might happen. And even if it's not something here in Simi, if it's just in the county, again, having those relationships with the other chiefs and the sheriff and our district attorney is vital. I mean, we can handle these things as a county. And again, I think if you've seen any problems that have happened in law enforcement over the last number of years with breakdowns maybe in investigations and things like that, it's because there's not that collaborative working relationship. But here in the county, we already have that. And I mean, if you look at just the borderline incident that happened, that brought together all the law enforcement agencies. We kind of all responded to that, and it was something that we were able to help each other through. So, again, that's really an important part of it. Well, I think we have just about come to the end of our meeting, and so again, I thank you for your time, and we're going to do another one. We're going to keep doing these quarterly. We haven't come up with a topic yet for the next one, but there are some ideas out there. But if you have ideas or things that you want to know about, please email. And if there are questions that we didn't get to tonight, or you think of further questions in the next few days, you can email me here at the police department. You just go on our website. You can link right into the police department email. It'll get to me, or you can email Commander Shorts. We're happy to answer those questions. Commander Shorts, if you have anything else to add.
Thank you for joining us. We hope to have some good topics coming up for you throughout the year.
This is, again, part of our ongoing engagement with our community, and we want to be accessible, and to the extent that we can be at this time. And like I said, hopefully as we go forward in the next quarter or quarter after that, we'll be at a better place in terms of the pandemic to where we can do these live. So thank you very much, everybody, and I hope you and your families continue to stay safe and healthy, and thank you for your time tonight.
Take care.